Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we will go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gained, one final score which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats, football history and its memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. And we're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 140 plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you can find us on the web at www.gridirongreatsmagazine.com. We're sponsored in part by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website for one of the largest selections of vintage football cards and memorabilia on the web, cards.com. And we're also sponsored in part by BST Auctions. Check out their website for their upcoming auction at bstauctions.com. It is at this time I'd like to introduce my special guest co-host, who is a well-known senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football card and memorabilia historian. He's co-owner of both MSB Sports Cards and BST Auctions. I'd like to welcome a good friend of ours to Gridiron Greats magazine, Mr. John Spano. John, welcome to the show this afternoon.
How you doing, Bob? Thanks for having me today.
Good, John. I'm good. Well, we're in the middle of football season. Even though it's early in the season, we got Friday night games, school, we got Saturday college games, and we got obviously the Sunday and Monday night and Thursday night NFL games. So we're getting in the swing of things. Football season is upon us, and today's show we're going to be talking a little bit about a few different things. I'd like to thank you for coming on and filling in for Joe today. And I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about the past 2018 National Sports Collectors Convention in Cleveland, which we both attended, and we both basically were there for the entire length of the show. I talked a bit about it in the last show with Joe about the dealers, materials, so on and so forth. And I was still somewhat impressed with the sheer volume of kids on the floor that were walking around with parents, aunts, uncles, guardians, so on and so forth, grandparents. And I was also impressed with some of the vintage material that was out there in the market for football collectors and the like. What were your thoughts, if anything, John, as far as the show was concerned, and as far as the any type of pulse that you can give our listeners to the convention itself?
Felt that it was a great show for us personally, and after I spoke to a few fellow collectors and some other dealers, I get a little bit of a different vibe. We took in daily. We were taking in consignments. It was a brisk pace. If anybody ever looked at me at any given moment, I typically was talking to somebody. I had somebody bringing something to the booth, and we did very well there. I think the biggest concern, and it's not even really a concern, I think it's just it's probably a swing in the market, is that the material to buy, to purchase at the show, not as readily available or not as available as some would like. People spend an entire year in anticipation, waiting to go to the National, hoping to find those pieces or those rare pieces, one-of-a-kind items, or maybe even something on their checklist. And from what a lot of people I spoke to, those items just weren't available. If they were there, and they were in an auction house booth ready for their next auction on display. And I understand that's just part of the market and how it works. The material is kind of cycling between collectors and auction houses right now, and we've had numerous discussions, and some people like that. Some people enjoy being able to sit back, get their catalogs, have a number of auction houses operating right now, and it's almost like going to a show. But other people like that old-fashioned feel, and I'm there with them. I recall going to shows, and I know, Bob, you've been going to the National a lot longer than I have, but I'm going on 20 plus years now. It's a nice feel to walk through an aisle and just kind of see some guy who may have been a lifelong collector and decided to buy a booth at the National, and just has his entire collection or a good part of his collection there for sale. No real organization. You just kind of rub your hands together and lick your chops a little bit, and I know I'm going to find something neat in here. And I don't see those many types of booths anymore. Everything's pretty well organized. It's kind of sterile, and I understand why some people would be a little dismayed with that, the state of affairs, and as far as the shows go. But I think the attendance was great, and I agree with you. I think that see a lot of young people there with their parents, and and it's kind of a learning experience for them. So, that's that. I guess that was my take overall. It was a good show for us.
It's an interesting word that you used as far as stale is concerned, and I think you hit the nail right on the head and I agree with you. It's so nice to have seen that longtime collector who set up a booth and started selling off bits and pieces or his entire collection. And you see a lot of stuff you really haven't seen before. And, it's a nice interaction with the collector because he probably feels much more comfortable trying to sell to other collectors, rather than worrying about wholesaling it out to a dealer type of situation. So that was a really good point you brought up. I vaguely remember, and I don't know if you remember, back in the 2014 Cleveland convention, that there was a fellow there who was a strict Cleveland Browns football card collector. And he basically had, I would say, at least 100 different binders of Cleveland Browns football cards there. I have never seen anything like it in my life. He literally had his entire collection there. And I briefly talked to the fellow, and he said he was basically selling everything off. He was kind of disgusted with the team, but he was a lifelong collector. And I saw stuff I had really never seen before. And it was a great education looking at his booths and his stuff. And I did not see him here this past convention, so I will assume he either sold most of his collection or he held it back and will sell it at a later time. But I do agree with you. Those are the types of booths you like and enjoy going through, because the mentality of a lot of collectors is, I like to look at stuff. I want to physically pick up a card or a program or a ticket stub. I want to look at it, and then I'll buy it type of situation. The market today, because of the internet, and we can't deny the existence of it, creates a much different feel for a show today. And that's why I still enjoy going to shows, even if they're local shows, and even if I don't find anything, at least there's, you can actually look at stuff again, that type of situation. And I think, both of us being pretty old school as far as the market is concerned and the collecting hobby, it's a big transition to go from that to a much more precise type of show and or precise type of internet purchase and or auction type of situation. So that's an interesting observation on your part as far as what we're looking at from the 2018 convention. I did, and I will agree with you, there was a ton of people there. There was a lot of people that came through the doors, the entire collection, the entire convention.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice being able to interact with a lot of folks. And like you said, I showed up on Tuesday morning and was cleaning up on Sunday afternoon, and it was pretty much a steady stream. And definitely a good local flavor, which you like to see when you do one of these nationals. And definitely, as you mentioned earlier too, more young people than I've seen in a while. And again, that's a good thing. We want that. You need that, especially obviously what we specialize in. We're talking about things that are approaching 100 years old. Professional items, football items, and college items, and older than that. You have to. It's not like you're going to be able to tap into I remember watching them play. It's more or less, I need to pick up a book or even go on the internet, and I need to read something and learn something and appreciate, what that person or those people or that team or that coach or how they've influenced the game today. Kind of do a timeline forward. And I think we have to maintain those connections, with the history of the game, with the collectibles, tangible reminders, things that people can hold on to and say, this was a ticket from this game, or this is a card from this player, he has a shot at, getting on the seniors ballot, that type of thing. I like having those kind of discussions with people because I know that they're interested, and maybe they're looking to invest a little bit, but, that's part of the hobby as well. And it's nothing that needs to be denied. But at the same time, making those connections and maintaining those connections is so, so important, and having a younger group in there that are starting to, show some interest and, pointing them in the right direction, I guess, and saying, hey, this is a good book to read, or, this is a good website to check out if you want to learn some more about that.
Very true, very true. And I do agree with you that unless there's some education behind the item, it's meaningless to someone who's not from that era. And I know for me, in my experiences collecting, because I always liked history, I always liked the history of the game growing up. So I was very active in the 60s and 70s with the limited amount of books and magazines out there, reading about the older game, so on and so forth, fascinated completely with the All-American Football Conference, which my father vaguely remembered after World War II, and trying to talk to him about it, picking his mind for the minimal amount of information that he remembered about it. So it all goes into play, and again, it can work for the hobbies to bring on the new collectors so that this material gets handed down from generation to generation of collectors, and it is still preserved. It's not lost, because too much of the history of the game has been lost over the years. Again, I've talked about this 100 times if I talked about it once. How many programs exist from the 1920 season? How many ticket stubs exist from a game in 1923, so on and so forth? They're minimal. So if you're owning one of them, you're owning part of history. That's what it really comes down to. And the more we preserve it, the better off we'll be in the long run. So that's
and there are some specialists. Yeah, there are some specialists in that era of football that I've heard people refer to as like, NFL to pre-Grange, late in the 1925 season. And as I've handled a lot of material over the last 10 years, For every, as rare as they may be, an NFL program from 1927, 1928, 1930, even, late in the season 25, for every 10 of those, there might be one program or one ticket stub from before that era, that 1920 to 19, pre-Grange, before he signed with the Bears. That era is just, and to grab a hold of something from that time period is tough, difficult. Those are difficult items, and then they are as rare, if not rarer, than any 19th century baseball item, similar type of item, a program or a ticket stub. They're extremely difficult, and again, it's just that connection that has to be made. And we've discussed this, and I know you and Joe have discussed it on the show before. It's just not quite the amount of appreciation for the history of the game that you see in baseball, and that's something that you don't want to point fingers, but the NFL needs to do a little bit better job of promoting it. And if you go to Canton, I think they do a nice job, but outside of that, not much. So,
right. Well, we always said too that I truly feel the NFL is looking at the history of the game from 1970 and above, rather than the 1919, 1969 era for a variety of reasons. But again, those people who are collecting those early pieces have a very, very historical and rare collection. And to me, it's just the beauty of the hobby to see people who collect that, and to have interviewed those people and seen those collections over the years. And it truly amazes me, to say the least. The classic question that comes out of the convention, and I always ask this, and I kind of try to surmise it in my own mind after a convention, after I've had time to digest everything that's occurred. Do you see any trends that are occurring right now in the hobby? For example, is there something more in demand than other items? Is there something that's cooled off in the market right now? What's your read, if anything? Because you're going to give me a different perspective than the way I possibly might see the market and what's hot and basically what's not hot.
I look at it two ways. First of all, when you look at item per item basis, the graded cards are still, that's where it's at. Now, sometimes they'll fluctuate. It'll be this one will be hot, or this set will be hot, and it'll cool off, and 3 or 4 more will come to market, and then that PSA 9 rookie of Henry Jordan, 63 Henry Jordan will go down and then up, and it'll fluctuate. I just use that card as an example. But overall, the graded sets. As soon as I list one of those, as soon as I started the preview for the auction last night, so many hits on those graded sets, and that's a good thing. People are that's generates interest, and people like to have their collections that way, in PSA or SGC or whatever holders. It does generate a fair amount of competition between collectors, which I think they enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'll be the first to admit that, as much as I resisted the whole grading thing 20, 25 years ago when it started up, I have a number of graded cards in my collection now. I do, and it's a good way to preserve them, and there's some things that can be discussed regarding the grading system itself, but that's another conversation. I still think rare historic pieces, items that are depicting Hall of Fame players that maybe don't have any mainstream items, rare things before World War II. For us, those things are always gold. They come in, and I list them, and typically do very well. One thing that I still a little disappointed, and I know you and we've probably talked about this on previous shows, paper ephemera. I think that those items really need to, if people can sit back and say, okay, I can't put this in a slab, I can't put a program in a slab, but I can really enjoy this. I can really learn something. They had editorials in those early programs, about the game and where it was going, or previous week's games. It's just a wealth of knowledge. And somebody's patient enough to sit down and collect those, or maybe put a run together of their alma mater, or maybe finding a player when he was in college before he got to the pros. There's just so many ways to collect that material, and I think that some of that is starting to pick up a little bit. I don't know if you remember in our last auction, I had a periodical from the Great Lakes Naval Station when Patty Driscoll and George Hallis were there. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I put them down. I listed them. They went crazy. I forget how many
Yep.
different bids the group had on them, and I had seen them before. I'd seen single examples. I don't remember them selling for that much, but there were a number of people interested in those items. And that made me feel like, this is good. This is a good thing because this is what has to happen. There's a program from a NFL championship game. Those type of things. Those typically do fine. It's just some of the other stuff from the 20s and 30s, late 20s, 30s up until World War II programs, even the programs from the 40s and 50s, Bob. That cover artwork in itself is, those are just playable pieces, and they're just really nice looking. And hopefully those will take off. They've been kind of stale for the last 5 years or so. I'd like to see that area of the market go. But game use stuff, always big. Signed items, people, a lot of autograph collectors for both Pro Football Hall of Famers and College Football Hall of Famers. Especially on significant pieces. Not just maybe on a jersey or on a ball or something like that. Those items are doing well too. Just about everything's doing well. You can't really go wrong at this point with vintage. Like I said, the only thing I think is lagging a little bit are the programs and maybe some of the periodicals that I know you and I have talked about before.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's touch upon that briefly. I'll give you one experience I had several years ago. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. There's a show here in Hartford, Connecticut called Paper Mania, which is a large paper show, and it's a pretty interesting show based upon the fact that you have a lot of different dealers there. But I was only myself and another fellow who had sports items, and I did touch upon a few of the collectors there who I really never knew. And I ended up becoming friendly with them. And one gentleman collects only sports programs from all the different sports, including football, from the 1930 to the 1939 era, which I thought was a pretty unique collectible. And he said, to me they're very rare. He said they're not as rare as 29 and back, not as rare as 40 up, but he says it's just a really nice area to get into to try to collect. And he was telling me a few of the pieces he had in his collection, and he said he told me, and this was a few years ago, that he felt that entire market was just completely unlooked at by collectors. And I have a feeling to a certain degree that that's very true. You know what I mean? I do agree with you that it's an underappreciated part of the hobby. The other area, periodicals of the time, for example, Football Illustrated, Football Annual, a couple other the magazines of those years, 1940s starting Street and Smith. I brought some extra Street and Smiths I had from the 1940s at that show. They sold within like an hour. I mean, they just flew out of there, and I was just shocked. And the fellow who bought them said, I love this stuff. I collect as many football annuals and publications like that as I can find. So transfer that enthusiasm, for lack of a better term, to a national convention. I don't see the enthusiasm to a certain degree at a national than I would do at a local paper show. You know what I mean? And I find that really, it's just mind-boggling to me. And even though there were some great older football programs and older annuals at the national, I just didn't see anybody, breaking down the table to try to buy it type of situation. So it's a very valid point that you bring up. It's an underappreciated part of the market, and at the same time, I think as more education occurs on it, it will start to pick up more and more. I know I did an article on Street and Smith annuals for Gridiron Greats when Frank had the magazine, and that was a well-received article because a lot of people really wanted to know, is it a doable run? And to me, it's still to this day very doable. And you have a nice piece of history there. You basically have a lot of historical reference tools you can use and refer to for the game, and it also helps you educate yourself on different pieces of the time too if you come across it. Uniforms, helmets, whatever the case may be. So it's a very valid point as far as what you're saying with the publications and paper, to say the least. One area that I did find interesting at the show, and to tie into what you're saying, photos of real photos from that time period, game issued photos and or UPI press photo or team-issued photos from the 30s and 40s and 50s seem to be very collectible and seem to be very much in demand. Did you see that too, or have you? I'm sure you've seen it in the past with some of the stuff you've had in the auctions.
For sure. That's something that I think is going to, and you talk about a finite market. This is nothing that you can recreate. This is nothing that a company is going to come out and produce something similar to. These were file photos that were used by the newspapers and the magazines, and they were kept sometimes for 60, 70, 80 years, reused and just kept as stock photos. And back when I first started putting my Hall of Fame collection together back in the 90s, when they would pop up, or I'd see them on even at the shows, they were selling for a crazy amount of money, a lot more than today. I'm not saying the market's not good again for them, but when all the newspapers started going out of business, and the newspapers started consolidating their files and saying, we need to go digital, and we're just going to get rid of these huge rooms full of old pictures. And there were certain people who bought those out, and they went to market, and that market crashed. I mean, almost overnight. I don't know the exact year, but I remember 2012, 2013, 2014, some of the stuff the amount of money that I paid for them back in the early 2000s, I've seen similar items come up for sale. I'm like, oh man, it makes you a little sick. But they seem to be rebounding, because I think people are realizing it is a finite market. There's only so many pictures of Arnie Herbert out there. There's only so many Grange pictures, although there may be more Grange pictures than Arnie Herbert pictures. That's the reason I bring up Arnie Herbert, is because, when I finally got my matchbook cover of him when I was doing my Hall of Fame collection, I had a placeholder in my collection. It was a wire photo of his that I think from 36 or 37 that I paid a lot of money for. And I've seen some similar ones come out recently, from some of the newspaper collections at a fraction of that cost. But I do believe that market is going to grab hold again, and when people start appreciating what these items are, most of them are one-of-a-kind pieces. If there was only a single negative made and only one picture struck from that, then that negative's probably long gone. That's it. So, I mean, you're basically looking at one-of-ones, and people are paying tens of thousands of dollars for modern cards that are, produced one-of-ones, and you've got a legitimate one-of-one of a Hall of Famer that's 70, 80, 90 years old. So, yeah, I think that market is one that's it's gonna maybe in a plateau right now, but definitely is gonna climb again. I hope. I think it would be. I think it's a good thing for people to get into.
Well, I think it will rebound, because I think as the collector becomes more advanced, and as the collector decides that they want to enter a different area, whatever that may be, team photos, game use, or game photos per se, or the individual player photos, the demand will go way up for it again. The other thing you mentioned was matchbooks, and I still, to me, they're red hot. I mean, there is a lot of demand for matchbooks of the 30s. There's demand I'm seeing from matchbooks from the 50s and 60s. Some of those early AFL teams issued their own sets of or had businesses issue matchbooks for them. I see those in demand too. I think that's a golden area of collecting that's still very much untouched to a large degree, even though a lot of mainstream collectors, vintage collectors, started getting into them. I still think there's a lot out in the market, and there's a lot to collect there. And there's a good variety of collecting, a player or team, so on and so forth. A lot of opportunity for growth, in my opinion, in those areas, especially for the better matchbooks, including the ones with the full strikers and the like.
For sure, and I have some collectors that have used MSB for the last 6 or 7 years. They put a trickle set together. There's a few guys that are doing this, and now they want to match with matchbooks. And I forget, I've actually had one collector tell me, and I can't remember the number, and I wish I could. I think 30 or 31 of the players in the trickle set have diamond matchbooks. Maybe it's even higher than that. It's not the full set. There's a couple guys missing, and a lot of collectors are like, okay, I want it's almost like a companion piece to their trickle set. They have the match cover as well, which is kind of neat when you think about it. I'll have to figure out that number. I can't remember exactly what it is. I'd have to cross-reference and look at the set. But it's a decent amount that you can do that. I have some other collectors who are putting together autographs from the Chickle set. Not autographs on the Chickles; those do exist, but finding autographs from all the players that were in that set, which is kind of neat too. So there's a number of different ways to make it interesting, because one of the big complaints, as you know, that you hear, well, there weren't all these sets issued. You have to do this and do that. I'm like, yeah, but that makes it more fun. There weren't 14 sets a year, from 1909 until World War II. There's enough football material out there to collect. There's plenty of material to collect, and you can get just about any player you want, depending on what how you want to collect them. So it just depends on the person and what they're willing to do.
And another overlooked paper area to me is signed personal checks by the former players. I mean, I know I have several in my collection from the 50s and 60s, which are, to me not overly rare, but still, how many of them actually existed over the years? And if you find stuff from the 30s and 40s, or a signed contract, or a signed, promotional agreement, or whatever, that's a pretty rare piece of football history there, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
there's something
for sure.
It's to me something that. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. If you can find one too that's made out to somebody else significant, you find a player who's. I'm trying to think of an example when we had the auction. I think it was Bert Bell to Carl Stork. Carl Stork, who probably should be in the Hall of Fame because he was pretty much Joe Carr's right-hand man for almost 20 years. And I think it was Bert Bell to Carl Stork, or vice versa, or something like that. I'm like, that's a pretty significant piece there. And you've got two bigwigs in the early NFL. So.
Right. So that's another area of opportunity, in my opinion, as far as collecting is concerned. And I do know several people who just collect players' autographs, and they probably have 60-70% of their collection as personal checks, which is pretty cool, to say the least. All right, you got a really big auction coming up over the next few weeks, and I'd like to spend the bulk of the rest of the time that we have, as the show permits, with a fall auction that you've come up with, and it's I looked at it this morning, and my mouth drops for a few of the items here. So I'm bringing it up online as far as your preview is concerned. Give us a few of the logistical specifics. When does it open and when does it close?
It's going to open next Friday. It will open next Friday, and that'll be the 28th. I haven't decided exactly what time. I have it slated for sometime earlier in the evening, and I typically get in there and I get a little antsy, I'll send out some text messages and say I'm going to open this a few minutes early. But sometime 7:30 Eastern, probably next Friday, the 28th, and then we go until the 21st of October, which is a Sunday, and we're going to go back to our same format we've used for the last couple of auctions, which is to close the auction at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we're going to do extended bidding for about 6-7 hours. And that's worked out pretty well. And we'll stop the auction sometime between 11:30 and midnight on that night on the 21st of October. It's worked out well for the last two auctions. It really has. It's been, as opposed to trying to navigate the 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning waters and having questions asked at why there's multiple bids being placed at 4 o'clock in the morning, and usually because somebody's up at 4 o'clock in the morning bidding. But it's much easier this way, and it gives people that extra day. At least it seems an extra day to do things. So that's what we're going to end it on the 21st.
Well, that's very logical to me that that auction houses should go to that, in my opinion, because it just really makes a heck of a lot more sense. Because I don't think a lot of people want to, especially if you're on the East Coast, you want to stay up to 4 o'clock in the morning, then you're going to get up in an hour and go to work type of thing. I mean, it's illogical to me, to say the least. So, in looking at the auction, there's two complete Fleer football sets I'd like for you to touch upon first. They're incredible sets. I mean, the quality of the cards are truly amazing. So can you give us some background on those two sets first?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. When the consigner, we made an agreement at the National this year that he was going to consign these two sets to us. He said he felt like he was sending his sons off to war. These are sets that are near and dear to his heart that he's been putting together for a long time. The 62 set, I believe, I might have these mixed up in my head. I'm looking at the auction sheet in front of me, but I don't remember the details. One of the sets has been all-time finest for almost 17 years. The other one since 2012. I don't know which one's which, but just unbelievable care in putting this set together. And you know, that it's you think about, you know, what's the difference between a PSA 7 and a PSA 8, a PSA 9. I'll say specifically, and you know, a lot of people say I can't tell the difference between an 8 and a 9. You know, you guys are crazy. These are all definitely 9s. I mean, there's 9s and 10s in both of these sets. And when you look at them, you understand, because this collector went through multiple 9s to get what he truly felt was a 9. So, you know, he'd look at it, make sure it was perfect. The cards are ridiculous. I mean, they're ridiculously, use maybe a term that's a little bit out of bounds for football, but they're beautiful. They really are. They really are incredibly just pack fresh. And you know, the numbers on these sets, as far as you know, their average overall, you know, 9 point this and 9 point that. So I mean, these are sets that I know people have been watching for a long time, because they've been on the registry. There's a million comments on the registry about these sets, and I'm assuming there's at least a dozen or more collectors that are, you know, waiting to take a shot at these. That's unbelievable cards.
The 62 Flair set is the one since 2002 that's been number one, and the 63 Flair set is the other one. And the 63 Flair set, I looked at the checklist, which beautiful, probably the nicest checklist I've ever seen over the years for that set. And that's a real tough checklist to try to find one way or the other.
Always
especially
off center.
That
this one's not. Yeah. This one is not off center. They always seem to be off center.
Yep, and that one is spot on, to say the least. Well, I'd like to get right into what is the cornerstone of, in my opinion, of this auction, is this 1894 Mayo set, and let's talk about that. It's 34 out of 35 cards, minus the Dunlop. Give us some background on that. I'm looking at it right now. It's just some incredible cards there with grades that are just unbelievable.
Well, first of all, just, you know, for anyone who will be bidding on this lot, we, at the request of the consignor, and this would have been what we would have done with it as well, but that he to auction it in two ways. We're going to auction it as a complete set, and we're going to auction it as individual cards. Now, how that works, when the auction's over, whatever the aggregate is for the individual cards, if that number is higher than whatever the final price was for the complete set, then the cards will go to individual collectors. If the final price for the complete set is higher than the individual cards, it will go that way. So there'll be people that have a chance to bid on this a number of ways, and I think that'll do best for the set and best for the collectors too, hopefully. And it's, again, you know, I using hyperbole, try to stay away from that as much as possible, but you mentioned jaw dropping. I had the set at the corner of our booth for the entire length of the National. I probably had, if I could have done a ticker for every time somebody stopped and looked and just commented, hundreds of people literally would stop and look at this. Some people had no idea what it was, but they're like, those cards, how old are they? They couldn't even believe it, the condition that they're in. You are, and you know, anybody's familiar with this set, it was black borders chip, and I'm sure they came chipped, you know, when they were in the tobacco tins, 124 years ago. And they're a lot of these cards are almost perfect. I mean, they literally are. You have a number of 8s in here. In fact, he has all the 8s that are graded to this point, and most of the 7s as well. Trying to think here off the top of my head, at 23, I believe, out of the 34 cards that are offered are the highest graded, with none higher. So there's no equals. And it's just, this is an instant for somebody who collects this. And again, I don't want to, you know, you try to stay away from the money as much as you can, but this is an investment that I can't even imagine there's anything like it in our hobby as far as football goes. Because you're not going to do this. Nobody's going to do this. going to be able to put a group like this together. It's possible. You've handled these cards, Bob. I've talked to other dealers who have handled these cards since the 70s, and for the most part, when you get a hold of one of these, when you put it in the slab nowadays, you're going to get a 1 or a 2. That's pretty much the rule. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a 3. Rarely a 4. There's 7 8s in this group. The GPA is over a 6 for the entire group. So you have some phenomenal cards that we tried to deduce the history, going back through not only our consignor and what he did to put this together, but, before that, where these cards came through, talked to a number of longtime collectors, and there's a little mystery involved with the whole set. Did it come from this area? Did these 4 cards from this group? But regardless, over the last 30 or 40 years as this set was put together, the person who originally started it did so with care and wanted to find the best examples that he could find, because they're just out of this world. The Poe is 7. It's the highest one graded. Obviously, that's going to be the centerpiece of this without the Dunlop. Just a magnificent card. It really is.
It's truly. It was mind-boggling to see him at the show, and it's even more mind-boggling for me to look at him in the auction. And to me, the sky's the limit on those cards, because I do agree with it. It's pretty much a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, especially for longtime collectors, to actually pick up those cards in that kind of condition. And I don't have a good feel on whether it'll sell as a complete lot. My real gut feeling is there's going to be a lot of serious bidding for each card, and I think that's what's going to probably end up happening, that it's going to sell as individual cards rather than as the complete set. Although I could be completely wrong at the same time. You know what I mean? It could
you never know. And
yeah.
You never know, and you hope it's just one's going to drive the other, and again, people are going to come out of it happy. I mean, that's just the best thing, And as you said, probably the best scenario would be to have some individuals get a couple cards each or a card each and say, oh, wow, I've got the best of the best. Nobody's ever going to have a better one.
Right.
But if somebody decides that they want us to say, I want all these, then if there's a couple, 3 people that are willing to do that, then it's going to go that direction. So I know that's not an answer, but it's going to be fun to watch regardless. I'm looking forward to it.
It's very logical that could happen. I mean, 3-4 guys get together and say, listen, you take this, you take that. I've done that in the past for different cards that I was looking for. I told fellow collectors who I knew were bidding on, say, hey, could you sell me these 2 if you win it? And they said, sure, type of thing. And that's actually how I finished up my 48 Bowman set. And it was kind of interesting doing it that way. But I got the last couple short prints that I needed, and I finally finished that set. There's another piece in this auction which I personally have heard about, and I never saw before until you actually have it in the auction, and I'm floored to actually see it in online here. And that's the 1903 Mogul Cigarettes Princeton Football Team Pack insert. And can you explain that to our listeners? And I highly recommend anybody who is following it to get online to BST Auctions and actually look at this this auction, because it's some really incredible historical pieces as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's lot 52 for anybody who's looking as they're listening. Lot 52 in the auction. Pick this up at the National as well. It's basically, when you look at it and you fold it out, it's almost 4 feet long. Each of the individual panels kind of looks like its own card, so you can see that somebody at that time, if they would have wanted to, could have just torn it down and broken it into a set like that. But this piece is intact.
Right.
It's a 3-dimensional piece too, which I found interesting when I looked at it, because it's, it was in a top loader, folded over a few times. But there's a mogul piece on the right-hand side of the front piece that I put the first image that's scanned in the auction that you could see. That's actually the side piece of the cigarette pack. So that'll fold over to the side. It's probably about a half-inch wide. And so that obviously was, would sit inside the sleeve, whatever, it was cardboard box or whatever. I've never seen a mogul pack before. But it's incredible. You've got probably 17, 18 players on there. You got a couple college Hall of Famers, and it is I'd never seen one before. I don't know, Bob, have you seen this before I put it in the auction?
I've never seen it. I've heard about it locally, where I had a couple of dealers locally ask me about it, and realistically, it was probably like 10, 15 years ago. And I tried doing some research on it, and I really couldn't come up with anything. So I was just shocked when I saw it here that, it's the same exact thing that they were talking about, and how they had a customer, an older collector, was looking for him. He was a big Princeton collector, and he had heard about him, and then he said, I'm looking for one. And so they called me up right away, and I said, gosh, I never heard of it. Let me try to research it and see what I can find out. I never saw it until today, actually. So it's really an amazing piece, to say the least. To me,
it's one that I looked at and stared at. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this obviously there's more of them out there since you've talked to other people about them, but I did a decent amount of research on this, and I couldn't find anything at all about it. So, I mean, it's noteworthy because, again, we talk about the rarity of tobacco pieces, in the football hobby. There's very few, outside of your Mayos and a couple other things that were multi-sport issues. But as far as a pure tobacco piece, and this formed the backbone of a cigarette pack. It was a foldover.
Right.
They're, I believe they're about, the panels themselves are about 3.5 inches. The whole thing is 3.5 inches tall. So it's almost standard size football card, and each of the individual panels is 2 inches wide. So it's a little bit narrower, but those would fold up and form the backbone of a cigarette pack. And if you've ever seen a cigarette pack from that era, they're a little smaller than what you expect, what you'd see today. So this was part of a cigarette pack, and just wonder if it was a special issue or sold only, around Princeton campus or something like that, or given out as some type of, kind of like a cigar or something like that, because you would think there'd be more of them around. But.
Right. That just blew me away this morning when I was looking at it. I said, holy mackerel. I was shocked. I was truly shocked to actually see it. And the other truly rare piece that I feel at least is rare in my mind, because I really haven't seen a lot of them, and I'm trying to get to it right now. You got a bunch of cabinet photos that you're listed in different lots. Give us a little background on those. Those are pretty interesting items. I'm trying to get into another screen here to find the one I was looking at.
The cabinet photos.
The 1907 Wolverines near set with the Schultz in it, the postcard, which honestly I've seen probably one or two of those over the years. I've never seen 14 out of 15 of those. That's an incredible piece.
The Dietschy set, the 1907 Dietschy set. It's very similar to, in fact, same manufacturer who did the 1907 Detroit Tiger set with the Ty Cobb in it. Right. So it's the exact same type of manufacturing process, the black backgrounds, and the player portraits, not portraits, but full players' pictures. Very rare. And again, you have Germany Schultz in there. We are missing the Yost, which most people consider kind of the key card in that group. They do come up every now and again, but this is a whole graded group, and again, a tremendous opportunity for somebody who would you want to get a bunch of these at one time. It's just a nice looking group of cards. Most of them are mid-grade, lower to mid-grade, but nothing abused, that's for sure. Whoever again put this group together wanted ones that were in decent shape. So. Right.
And you got some incredible matchbooks in there too. I'm looking at those now. And that's some amazing matchbooks as far as you got the Nagurski, you got the Hubbard, you got the Henkel in the 33 Silver Series. It's some amazing pieces there. And you got the Ray Flaherty one.
Yeah, that Nagurski, as you know, I've been tracking these matchbooks since the late 90s, and I honestly have only seen, in that time, this one included, I think 4 Nagurskis. And this one is cut. It's trimmed. Everything's there. His picture in the description, but it's bobtail, been removed. But it's as rare as just about any of the 34s. Now, there's some 34s that are only known by single or two examples. Like I said, this Nagurski, I'd be hard-pressed, and if I talk to some other collectors of matchbooks, seeing more than 5 or 6 of them in the last 20 years. And obviously, that's Nagurski. So that's what makes it a little more, sweet to grab one of those, especially if you've never seen one or have one in your collection. It's a tough card. Tough short print from the 33 group.
Right. And going forward year-wise, in a league that seems to always be neglected, you got a complete 56 Parkhurst CFL set, all 50 cards in it. And for those people who don't realize, CFL collectors, this set has the Bud Grant, quote-unquote, rookie card in it. And that's a beautiful set of cards, all 50. I haven't seen a complete set of these. I don't know how many years, and they haven't been developed either. So it's an amazing set. Give us some background on that if you can.
Yeah, that walked up to the National this year as well, and the consignor basically didn't know much about him. He's a baseball collector that came in a group. He's like, they came with all these little white sheets of paper, these funny little white sheets of paper. They felt kind of like fabric, but they were kind of crumbling in my fingers as I was touching them. And I'm like, well, he had developed 2 of them, and as you mentioned, they're undeveloped.
Yeah.
They're photos.
Yeah.
They're photos, and I'm assuming on these little white sheets of paper they had with them, there's some type of silver nitrate or something like that. And the person who got them, when you buy them in a pack, I believe I did a little research, they came in a pack of 5 with a developing sheet, and you'd scratch the surface, and the pictures would develop. Kind of similar to what the 48 Magic, but those you put in water. Water and sunlight, or just sunlight. Yeah, these you had these little pieces of paper and you rubbed across, and he was interested to see because he knew he had something significant. So he actually rubbed 2 of the cards to see if it still worked, and they did. They came out real nicely. So that's going to be the buyer's decision, what they want to do with them. They're a nice group of cards. You don't see them. I think the highest one I saw on the registry was a 6, and I think there was only 1 6. Most of them are typically 2s and 3s. These are all nice, mid-grade. There's a couple that have a few creases in them. Not promising anything, off the charts as far as numbers go, but it's a solid group of cards, and they were undeveloped. They've sat for the last, I guess, 62 years without being developed, and there's 38 or 39 sheets of developing paper that come with the group. So that again will be a temptation for the high bidder on that one to see what they want to do with them, if they want to develop them or not, or just leave them as is. So
I have
nice group.
Right. I have one type card of the 56 Barking, and that's man, oh man, those are tough to find, to say the least. And you also have a partial set of the Bell Brands Rams from 1960, which is, again, a brutal set to try to put together and to find in any condition. And that looks really nice, too.
It's a gorgeous set, and I was kind of disappointed. I sent a few of them in. They came in raw, on consignment, and they were gorgeous. I mean, again, there's a couple in there that have a few ding corners, but there's no chipping, and those yellow ink, chips really easily. Just really nice. Centering's real good. I sent a few in, and I got some 6s and 7s. I was expecting to get a little bit higher, but it is what it is. You can only hope when you do that. But if this is a good, I don't even want to say good start, you're almost finished, but it is missing the one crazy, insane short print. And then the other card's one of the higher numbers, which I guess are a little more difficult than the low numbers, but I've seen them before. They're available. So, again, collector have an instant grouping of these things, and they're tough individually just to find them. There's a few here and there on eBay, and that's it. But again, almost an entire group, 37 out of 39. So.
Yeah. That's a really tough set to put together. I know I got a handful of those. I've actually sold several over the years to collectors who have been trying to put the set together, and I said to myself, this is not going to be a set I'm going to put together anytime soon, so I'd rather see them complete their sets. You've got some beautiful 35 to 37 Wheaties cards and a couple of boxes in the auction also.
Yeah, we had a near grouping, because you can't really call them sets because there's multiple sets within the grouping, but as you said, 35 to 37. So I just want to make that. I've had a few people ask me already, like, well, that's a complete set. I'm like, well, there are a bunch of sets, but a lot of times they're offered. There's 50 of them that were offered over those years, and they're all 50 are available there. And you've got the Wayne Milner, which is one of the tougher ones. You've got the Arnie Herber and the Nagurski and the 37 group, and they're nice. They're really nice grouping. We 46 out of 50, I think, in the last auction, and did really, really well. And it had a lot of activity and a lot of bidders after it. So. Hoping for the same type of action on this group. Just a nice set of again, we talk about things. There's nothing to collect about, early football players. You got, 50 really significant names here. They didn't just get selected to get slapped on the back of a Wheaties box for no reason. So you've got some pretty high-level players, professional income.
Right. And you also have that R311 2 complete set of 17 with Red Grange from the 35 Chickle set, that insert set. And wow, I haven't seen a complete set of those in years. That's another beautiful set you got offered here too.
It is, and you've got the Bach in there, which I think we've probably talked about before. At least, I don't know if we talked about it on the show. That card 10 years ago, there were people questioning high-level collectors questioning the existence of that card, if it was even out there. And there's been a few of them that have emerged since then, but. Yeah, that's a great opportunity, again, for a collector who wants to add something nice to their Chickle set. If they have a Chickle set they're working on, too. Great companion set.
Those are beautiful sets. You also have a 64 Topps football file copy set with the unissued one-set wax box. And as we're running out of time here, give us a little talk about that, to explain that. I haven't seen one of these, and I can't even remember one, quite a while.
The Topps, I guess, just probably for reference, every year put together a file set where they put it in a little, like a scrapbook format almost, where they had all the cards from the set, all the wax wrappers they planned on issuing, all the wax boxes, which were unassembled but folded, and just most of them are, some adhesive to hold them in place. There's a one-set box in there that was not issued. I think, according to Consigner, did a lot of research on it. That was the year they started phasing out the 1 cent. And so they, I think he said they sold some of them in rack packs or as racks, but they didn't issue the boxes, the 1 cent packs that year. And this box was never issued. And I'd done a lot of research, and if somebody comes up and says to me in the next 3 weeks, hey, I have an example of that box, then I'll obviously edit the lot. But at this point, I've done enough research to think this is the only example of that. And if you're putting together a run of wax boxes and you want one that nobody else is going to have, this would be the option.
So. That's exactly right. I saw the 1960 Topps similar type of file for the cards, the wrappers, and the box. I always thought that was the coolest thing. And this is now the second one I've actually seen for sale. So it's a pretty unique item, especially if you're a 1960s collector or a Topps collector, so on and so forth. It's just truly amazing. We're almost out of time. We're almost out of time. I got like 2 minutes left. Again, we're sponsored in part by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website, msbsportscards.com, and also by BST Auctions for this incredible auction coming up. Check out their website with the auction preview, bstauctions.com. John, any final thoughts, ideas, anything else you want to go over real quick? I wish you well on this auction. This is truly amazing. I know I got a couple items I'm going to make a couple bids on, but it's truly amazing to see. This is football history at its best, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob. That's really the only thoughts I have, and have fun. Everybody enjoy this and see it as an opportunity to kind of grab a piece of history and enjoy yourself doing it. So always keep it fun. That's the most important thing.
That's very true. John, thank you for filling in for Joe today. Joe will be back next week. We're scheduling a few shows over the next couple weeks. We'll be back on track as far as our podcast is concerned. Thanks to John Spana, senior contributor writing Gridiron Greats magazine, a true football and memorabilia historian, and someone whose invaluable knowledge to me has done a lot of great things for our hobby over the past 15 years. I truly appreciate everything you do for the hobby.
Have a good day.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. John Spano again. our special guest co-host. I was glad to have him on, and we could talk about the auction. Again, we'll be on next week. If you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats Magazine, now's the time. GridironGreatsMagazine.com. Go online and you can subscribe. Special 4 issues for $29.95. We also have all our back issues available for sale from issue 23 when we took over the magazine to our last issue, number 61. Issue 62 will be out over the next month, and will be in the mail at that time. Thank you for listening. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine. Take care.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.